Hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast, coming to you from Melbourne, Solihull and London for one final time before our daily Australian Open pods begin on Wednesday, otherwise known as 1 Point Slam Day. Between now and then, David and Matt will be traversing the entire planet, just like Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner in their private jet from Seoul. David, did you see the footage of them landing at their private terminal in Melbourne together, trying to pretend that they'd had a tough flight experience just like us, but we all know that they'd just stepped off a private jet.
No, I haven't seen that. I now must seek that out because you've painted a very good picture.
I reckon Matt's seen it.
I've seen it, yeah. They had to do the thing of being interviewed straight after a long haul flight, but I do have slightly less sympathy because of the private jet nature of their experience.
They were like, "Oh, I'm so tired, still sleepy." Like, yeah, yeah. Good to have them in Australia, though. They've really spent the last few days sort of encapsulating the entire landscape of men's tennis for us, haven't they? Everybody else thrashing around for points in various parts of Australia in very challenging conditions. Those two just having a laugh in South Korea, just playing their own tier of the sport. It was like a computer game where they'd just unlocked a level that nobody else had access to, and that is the situation in men's tennis at the moment.
Yeah, no notes.
Brand Sinkeraz, aren't they? Really, they come as a pair now. Was there a result from their match? I don't know whether I saw a result.
Oh, I don't actually know. The results seem to be bromance. If I didn't know better, and this might just be my algorithm at the moment, if I didn't know better, I'd say both their agents have seen Heated Rivalry and given them some instruction.
I think that's all of our algorithms.
Yeah, David doesn't.
I haven't seen it, so I have downloaded it because I heard it was good.
David, and
yeah. Hang on, David. Hang on, David. If you didn't want to watch challenges on the plane, I can guarantee you're not going to want to watch Heated Rivalry on the plane.
Hang on, have you actually downloaded it for the plane?
Yeah, well, I've downloaded it as an option, but then I also recorded Jaws 1 and Jaws 2 the other day, which I haven't seen for about 38 years. So, I don't intend to watch any of these things. It just makes me feel, part of it.
Okay, yeah. I'm really excited, David, for you to be part of the Heated Rivalry discussion.
Okay.
I mean, frankly, the discussion is very much happening. Tennis Channel said that, like in their official write-up of the event, they said they are sort of engaging in their heated rivalry. An official account, tennis.com, and part of the fun sort of social media content that the exhibition had them doing involved questions like, what are you saved as in each other's phones? Things like this. These are all very much
do you think they
heated rivalry coded. No.
Do you think they...
I think the people, coming up with the event very much understood those references. I would be shocked to my core if Sinner and Alcaraz have watched Heated Rivalry and are
Maybe they watch
aware
it
of it.
Together on their private plane. I'd watch it on a private plane. Just not on a commercial plane, David.
Right. What if my neighbours are asleep? Then I can, sneak in a quick 15 minutes.
David, I wouldn't sneak in a quick 15 minutes.
Okay. Maybe I'll start with challenges. Now that I've downloaded this, maybe I can... Maybe
Start
it's all...
Challenges can be your gateway drug, and we'll see how that goes and take it from there.
I don't know what to do with Jaws 1 and 2. Probably not on a plane when I'm about to go overseas, I suppose.
I don't know why you've done that to yourself, because you talk a lot about how genuinely traumatic Jaws was for you as a child. You don't like any of my shark jokes.
No.
Yeah. I don't know why you've done that.
Quite big on facing my fears.
Well, I'd suggest you watch Challenges on the Plane then, David.
Okay. Don't intend to go in the sea in Perth, though. So,
Folks, we suddenly have a lot to talk about in the tennis world. We had a lot to talk about last night, didn't we, when we recorded our first Tennis Relived show of the year. How long was it, Matt?
It was 2 hours and 16 minutes for the final edit. There were a lot of Andy Murray near misses at the Australian Open.
They're all worth it. Content Andy Murray gave us to talk about. With the theme of our show was, well, exactly as Matt said, Andy Murray's near misses at the Australian Open, kind of charting Andy Murray's career down under. 5 finals is the most that any man or woman has ever played and lost without ever winning a final at that slam. That's an unfortunate record that Andy Murray has, or, as we discussed in our intro to the show, an incredible record that Andy Murray has. He reached 5 finals at this place and ran into Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer, 2 of the greatest players of all time. So there was a lot for us to get our teeth into. We really enjoyed the show despite all the reliving of trauma, and it is up now for friends of the Tennis Podcast to listen to. And if you'd like to become a friend of the Tennis Podcast, you can do that at any time. If you'd like to become a friend of the Tennis Podcast at pet mascot level, then the deadline to do that is a week from now. You just have 1 more week left to get your pet as a mascot for an episode of the Tennis Podcast. You also have 1 week left to book yourself a guest editor spot, or to take us on at predictions for 2026. So on with the show, and we start with the United Cup that has just finished up in Sydney at midnight local time, of course, and it finished with Poland beating Switzerland 2-1 in a really exciting final. We all have just watched Katarzyna Kawa and Jan Zielinski beat the seemingly unbeatable Belinda Bencic and Jakub Paul 6-4, 6-3 in the deciding mixed doubles to clinch the tie for Poland finally. That after Belinda Bencic beat Iga Swiatek 3-6, 6-love, 6-3. That gave Switzerland the lead, and it gave Belinda Bencic her 9th win of the tournament across singles and doubles. Then we saw Hubert Hurkacz defeat Stan Wawrinka 6-3, 3-6, 6-3. That second set for Wawrinka described by David Law as heroic but pointless. And then, as I've just said, Kawa and Zielinski putting in an epic performance to beat Bencic and Paul and finally win the United Cup for Poland, because, Matt, speaking of near misses, Poland have had some in this competition.
Yes, I believe they may have had a match point previously to win the whole thing and just not quite be able to get there. I think that was against Germany, wasn't it? And it does feel like Poland have been one of the standout teams of the United Cup over the last 4 years or so. You know, they've really committed to it, with Iga Swiatek there, starting her season, obviously backed up really well by Hubert Hurkacz. And this year with Kawa and Zielinski as well in the doubles being absolutely fantastic. And it is a slightly odd feeling to have, you know, Poland winning the United Cup, and yet it wasn't Iga Swiatek being the total leader of that team, earning the most points, stepping in doubles and sort of taking it all on and always winning the singles. It was actually, okay, she got some singles wins at the start of the event, but actually it was the remarkable form of Hubert Hurkacz on his comeback and that doubles specialist duo of Kawa and Zielinski that have ended up getting this done for Poland really, really impressively. And yeah, I wouldn't have thought that would be possible for Poland if Iga Swiatek was going to have the tournament that she would have, for them to come out and win it. So it's a kind of strange feeling. I think nice to see Swiatek at the end there looking so happy and so pleased and so part of that team, even without her own individual success in the last couple of days. But definitely a few days that brings up a lot of questions about the Iga Swiatek form heading into the Australian Open. But yeah, like, it does feel about right that Poland have finally won a United Cup, as you say.
Yeah, let's talk about the Iga Swiatek of it all, because she did look so genuinely happy just now to be leaving Sydney, to have finally won this thing with Poland. We know what it means to her to represent Poland. We know that defeat in the Olympic semi-final was one of the most crushing of her career. In fact, I think some of the most devastating Swiatek scenes that we've witnessed have been at the Olympics. And just look at the support that Poland get at the United Cup. They've got nuns showing up. I don't understand the nun. It's not for me, but people seem really into it. And you know, she carries the brunt of that pressure, doesn't she? You know, bless Hubert Hurkacz, but she's bearing the brunt of that pressure. And of course, pressure is a privilege, etc. But you know, it's a lot. And she looked genuinely so thrilled, and that was great to see. And she's leaving with that happy feeling, but she's also, David, leaving with the feeling of 2 consecutive, quite bruising defeats to near rivals. And that is unusual. There aren't many tournaments where it's even possible to leave with 2 consecutive defeats to near rivals. The only other one really is the WTA finals, and if you're leaving there, it's at least the end of your season and you can put it behind you and go to the Maldives. She's now got to go to the Australian Open with that feeling. It's a strange place for her to be.
It is. It is, because Coco Gauff really took it to her, and then Belinda Bencic in sets 2 and 3 really took it to her. And I mean, look, they played out of their minds. I was really impressed with both of them, and I think that must be factored into any analysis of where Swiatek is, because it's not all on her racket. You know, there are sometimes you're going to play somebody who's going to take it away from you, and those 2 I feel like did that. But at the same time, the very best players, when they are at their best, find a way, tweak something, find a way to ride out the storm, maybe find a level that even their opponent can't deal with, you know. And I realise in best of 3 sets that's more tricky, but I think Sabalenka tends to find a way more than Swiatek does. Swiatek is the most incredible front runner. And we saw in her first couple of matches that she played at the United Cup, she just looked bang on it. You know, they're over so quickly. And I was very interested to watch her play against Coco Gauff, because, you know, theirs is an interesting rivalry, totally one-sided for years, and Gauff couldn't even get a win. And then suddenly she gets one, and then she seems to establish a bit of a blueprint of how to play her, and she actually now seems to be playing her best tennis when it's against Iga Swiatek. It's almost like it unleashes her, and she stops worrying about the fiddly bits she's got to think about on a serve or a forehand. She just goes for it, targets bits of Swiatek's game and with power, and rushes her and kind of takes over. And Swiatek doesn't seem to have an answer to that really now. And meanwhile, Bencic, a player who's just not lost a match all week at the United Cup, 9-0. That is extraordinary stuff. Once she hits her straps, it's a very difficult game to combat. But usually you feel as though the very top players will just kind of not allow that. Well, Swiatek doesn't appear to have enough feel on her big shots to be able to totally trust them. And you know, James Hansen, the athletics editor, was doing some analysis on his social media account of what Swiatek's trying to do with Wim Fissette, and has been trying to do for the last year or so, of trying to bring a bit of the variety back and not just have this all-out aggression that she had under Thomas Wojciechowski. And yet that's kind of ended up being in her DNA because of how well conditioned it is. And so she is a bit caught on a hard court, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, it's not the fact of her losing to Gauff and Bencic playing out of their minds. It's the pattern of these defeats, I think, and it's a continuation of a pattern that we saw last year, and we were kind of wary about being too alarmist about these sort of defeats that these matches that seem to get away from Swiatek and crumble before her and our eyes, because she won Wimbledon last year. You know, as we discussed in all of our various review shows, we think she'd have signed for last season at the start of it. It was a good season for Iga Swiatek, and yet there was this slightly dark underbelly of defeats that looked like this, where once the match got away from her, once her opponent gets her teeth into the match, she starts malfunctioning, and her appears to resort to the default of hitting harder and taking more and more risk, the opposite of what we understand that her project is with Winfrey, and it's becoming pretty maddening to watch, because it's the definition of madness. You know, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome is the kind of proverbial definition of madness, and yet it feels like that is what we're watching in these types of matches. She still has matches where she looks absolutely awesome throughout, and she's cleaning really great players' clocks. But these matches are happening, and Swiatek wants to be a Grand Slam champion, and this is a problem, Matt.
It is a problem, yeah. And, you know, you use that word pattern. The pattern now is that it feels like when Swiatek goes up against fellow top players, more often than not at the moment, she's not winning those matches, you know, and she always used to have dominant records over fellow top players, but that is something that has really changed in the last few years, in the last year or so. And I think it is because of what you describe, in terms of these players are good enough now to be able to push her and make it stressful and create pressure. And in those moments, Swiatek, caught between playing styles, is going down the route of hitting harder and harder, and is doing it in quite a hectic manner and losing control of her game. And we've seen it on clay last year even. We've seen it a lot on the hard courts. Oddly, the outlier now in terms of the last year or so was Wimbledon. And I do think there was something to be said there for a tournament where it did feel like the pressure was off quite a lot more. I know she faced opponents there in the latter stages who have since beaten her and proved to be in her category. It wasn't like she had a kind draw whatsoever with Bencic and Anisimova there at the end. But neither of those players really showed up in those matches to anything like their best, due to sort of injury for Bencic, and I just think total nerves for Anisimova in that final. But it is a problem for Swiatek now, like increasingly so. And I don't know. I don't know sort of how much time you give it, you know, like she's been with Winfrey for quite a while now, and these things don't seem to be improving. And I think the other thing that happened during Wimbledon was that she had a particularly good serving tournament, and she carried that on in Cincinnati, and sort of that summer spell she served well. Unfortunately, her serve seems to have dropped off a cliff again, and it makes her extremely vulnerable and allows these other players, I think, to get into the match and be able to attack that shot. And that creates the stress. So from a technical point of view, I really think the serve needs to improve and get back to where it was sort of through the summer last year. And that would help sort of alleviate maybe some of the stress at times, like it did at Wimbledon and Cincinnati. But I do think the issue runs deeper than that, and trying to manage these moments of stress better is a huge task for Iga Swiatek right now. And it feels like a lot of the field, not, you know, I'm talking mostly about the other best players in the world, have caught up to Iga Swiatek over the last year or so. You know, I think the gap between Swiatek and Sabalenka has grown. Sabalenka has sort of moved ahead. and the other players have sort of slightly caught up to Iga Swiatek. Not enough sort of over the course of the season to counter her genuinely phenomenal still consistency across all tournaments. That's why she's still the number 2 in the world. But in sort of a lot of individual matches now, you feel like there's a lot more players that can beat Iga Swiatek than there were a couple of years ago. And it makes things tough for her.
The Gauff matchup, I feel, particularly sheds a light on the problem with Iga Swiatek, because Gauff is loose in that matchup in a way that she doesn't seem to be a lot at the minute. Like, a lot of her serving and forehand issues do just seem to kind of miraculously evaporate when she's on the court with Swiatek now. And number 2, I think Gauff knows that if she can hang in the rally long enough, Iga Swiatek will make a mistake, and nobody hangs in a rally better than Coco Gauff. She makes balls that absolutely nobody else can make. I reckon she makes sort of 25% more balls than pretty much anybody else in the WTA. It's that ridiculous. And yeah, she's like, okay, I'll rest on my positives, and you're going to cough up enough errors for me to do this thing, and I'm comfortable in that dynamic. And it's slightly alarming to watch.
It's 8 sets in a row now that Gauff has won against Swiatek. 4 matches in a row, all of them straight sets. A total turnaround of that head-to-head, and it did sort of get me thinking about Sabalenka's comment in that press conference after she'd lost to Gauff in the French Open final, saying, "Oh, well, Iga would have won." And, I kind of sort of bristled at that at the time and thought, I mean, probably, but I wouldn't be so sure. And now, having seen the last few months play out, it does sort of feel like Gauff has figured out how to play Swiatek, and maybe could have even done the same thing in that French Open final to Swiatek to what she did to Sabalenka. And yeah, the way Gauff's forehand holds up now in those exchanges is really, really notable. And she puts pressure on Swiatek in a different way. Yes, I think she does try to be a bit more aggressive generally, Gauff, when she plays Swiatek, but she also shrinks Swiatek's court, with her court coverage, and Swiatek doesn't have the margins to play with, and can end up hitting out.
She could have the margins to play with. She has such skill. She she can put the shape on the ball, and she has the skill set to do what it A, looks so clearly like she needs to do, and B, what she and Winfrey have told us is the plan for her to do. So it's sort of strange thinking about the Winfrey situation, because you think, well, look, this isn't working, and yet it sounds like what he's telling her to do is the right thing. So either it's just not, we were talking about it in the Andy Murray show yesterday, weren't we? Sometimes it's about who you hear things from. With coaching, it's not necessarily about what they're saying.
And I think it's more complicated, though, guys. Just in as much as you try to establish variety, Okay, so when? So when do you choose which shot? It's not as easy as it used to be. Just go in for it.
Very true, but I think this isn't about variety. Actually, this is just about slightly more conservative type of tennis, just not pulling the trigger on every. But
when to do is the decision making issue.
Yeah, I just felt like today against Bencic, she came out with totally the right plan. Like, that first set was a really good set. Bencic said it herself. She felt like she was playing well, and yet she was 3-love down right at the start, because Swiatek was hitting with height and spin and shape and control on her shots. Like, she was being aggressive, but she wasn't being reckless with it. It was really good from Iga Swiatek, like really good. That tennis is so clearly still there for her. It's just she lost it and wasn't able to get it back. And obviously, like you said, David, Bencic, I mean, whenever she puts on a Swiss shirt, is the best version of herself and was absolutely phenomenal. And maybe even if Swiatek had kept playing well, she still wouldn't have won this match. But she never managed to get that style of tennis back. It became played on Bencic's terms completely, and I just found that odd how it disappeared for Swiatek over the course of the match, I suppose.
Let's talk about Bencic, shall we? Bencic has been awesome before. Bencic has been awesome in, okay, not quite this tournament, but the equivalent of this tournament. She's been awesome at the Hopman Cup. I think I once picked her at least to reach the final of the Australian Open in our podcast predictions off the back of some brilliance at the Hopman Cup. I'm going to say 2019, could have been 2018. Anyway, is this different, David?
Don't know. Don't know. I mean, it's awesome, but the first week of the year, I just think it's so hard to draw conclusions. If somebody had told me that Coco Gauff wasn't going to be in the final throes of the Australian Open last year after the week she had at the United Cup, I would not have believed it. I do think it's exciting for Bencic coming in. If she plays this sort of tennis, she's absolutely a contender for the title, I think, to go really deep, or at least. I mean, I do think it's problematic if she runs into the very biggest hitters with her serve. But they've also got to play well. I know it's not very satisfactory as a sort of conclusion, but I think her form is exciting, but I don't think you can draw conclusions that it's going to be different necessarily.
The serve is an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because this is a new service technique that she's got. Going into a slam with it for the first time, she sort of changed it after the US Open, didn't she, last year? And
she
I think
changed it not to improve it, but to protect her shoulder. She was experiencing shoulder pain, and that always worries me. Especially when it's one of these abbreviated motions. Then they're never particularly pretty on the eye, are they? The abbreviated motions, and yet, this seems to be working extremely well for her, Matt.
It does, yeah. I think one of the things we talked about at Wimbledon last year is that the grass kind of suited her serve, because she doesn't really have a easy kick serve that she can hit. It is much more of a slice serve, so stays low, skids through on the grass. Whereas I think a lot of times she's come unstuck in the biggest matches against the best players because the slice second serve is a little bit less reliable than the kick second serve, and just generally that shot has let her down. If the Bencic serve has levelled up, then that is a point of difference going into this Grand Slam compared to previously. And from what we saw at the United Cup, it looked like it has, but I do think the test comes at the Australian Open. And right now it still feels like unlikely to me that she would win the Australian Open. Partly because of the form of Aryna Sabalenka, by the way, today in Brisbane, which we'll get to. But she's playing pretty much as well as like anyone else. It's just that I would probably back Gauff more in a slam because she's been there and done it. And I would even back Swiatek more in a slam because she's been there and done it. Like that experience counts for something. So I'm very impressed with Bencic, and I think her name in the draw is going to be one of the first ones I'm looking out for. Like, which top seed could she potentially just disrupt in the sort of fourth round quarterfinal stage? I suspect.
What's she going to be, 9th seed, 10th seed, something like that? So, potentially a fourth round opponent for one of the very top players, which is interesting.
Yeah, and look, she was brilliant, but as I said, she is normally her best self in these team competitions. And I don't just mean Billie Jean King Cup as well, Olympics. When she puts on that Swiss shirt, those colours, she does seem to find something extra. And I know that's such unsatisfactory analysis, but I haven't got anything else to go on.
But the record speaks for
but
itself.
The record speaks for itself.
It's unreal, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it really is.
The
They are.
very best players come with their very best stuff more often at the slams and find something.
And she's got something more to play for than Grand Slam glory, and that is reclaiming her place on the backhand list. Maybe that's the fire in her belly.
Or maybe she's already done it. Sorry, Maya joint.
Oh, is this official?
Yeah.
Is that an announcement?
That is.
How long was Maya joint on the list for?
Since Eastbourne last year, she had a good run. Bencic has served her sentence for using her protected ranking to enter US Open mixed doubles with Alexander Zverev. She's had a period away from the backhand list, but I'm sorry, it's undeniable.
It is undeniable.
I love that backhand. I love it.
It is.
That's why it was on the OG list.
I came to understand it this week watching it. I watched a lot of Belinda Bencic from a very lovely position in the RAC arena in Perth, and it's a real connoisseur's game. Belinda Bencic is, isn't it? It's not in your face, like it's not brute power. It's not. I don't know. Everything about it is quite subtle. It's take the timing and the taking the ball early. It'd be quite hard to explain to a non-tennis fan why she's so good. But I've always understood that she's really good, but I really, really came to appreciate the joy of watching it this week. So there's just such a smoothness, Matt. I get it. But I do think that's quite brutal for poor old Maya Joint coming into
in sensation season. I know.
But she barely got a racket on the ball against Swiatek, let alone a backhand.
Right, seeing those, like we had the matchup to compare, right? We saw the damage the Bencic backhand did. It's in a different league. It has to be on the list.
Okay, well, other than poor old Maya Joint being rubbish, anything else from the United Cup that's unfolded over the last few days that we would like to pick out to talk about, David?
I'd like to just throw a word in the way of Hubert Hurkacz, who has just been fantastic. I mean, this guy couldn't play for 6-7 months because of a knee surgery. I mean, the thought of coming back on a knee that you don't know how he's going to react under pressure and playing like that. I mean, he beat Zverev, he beat Fritz, he's beaten Wawrinka today. He's serving so well, and I mean, I know that it might not be the same under best of 5 sets, and look, I would probably expect that. I would probably expect him to hit a wall at some point, but still, absolutely sensational run of performances, and and the manner in which he did them as well felt a little bit different to what I've seen from him before. Perhaps just being fresh and being back has been exciting and stopped him worrying.
Nicholas Massou has spent a lot of time being a sort of coach with no coaching to do, hasn't he? Because he's stuck by Dominic Thiem through his extended absence, and he's stuck by Hubert Hurkacz. It was really lovely to see him back on the sidelines.
Yeah, in Polish colours, as they do at the United Cup. That's always a bit jarring.
Cup, isn't it?
Yeah. And Jim Courier was saying in commentary how, I think it was a year ago, that Hurkacz switched racket and was very much hoping for one that would give him a bit more pop on the ball, and yet then comes his season where he's injured and isn't really able to get to grips with that or play enough matches with it. He's obviously stuck with that racket for his comeback, and Courier was saying he feels like Hurkacz suddenly looks a lot more comfortable with that racket, like he spent a lot more time with it, and they were putting up the stats on his sort of reps on the ball in terms of his forehand, which has always been his dodgy shot, and he was way up. He was able to hit that shot with a lot more topspin and control generally through this tournament, and obviously serving out of his mind. So those that made him so dangerous, and he's going to be one of the most dangerous players in that Australian Open draw based on the form he's had. No one is going to want to draw Hubert Hurkacz in the first couple of rounds. For him, slams have always been a bit of a problem for him. His slam record compared to his tour record is quite disappointing. But whether he can now take this to a slam is to be seen. But yeah, props to him, because he really was incredible this week in a way that I just was not expecting at all so soon into his comeback.
If Hubert Hurkacz could have a good forehand, he'd be the best player in the world. Well,
and able to get over the line.
He'd be the third best player in the world.
Yeah, third best player in the world is really up for grabs.
So
well, he's just beaten that one, hasn't he? Quite handily the other day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Taylor Fritz looks to be struggling, doesn't he? Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's going to play the Australian Open, but he lost to Tsitsipas, lost to Hurkacz. You know, was competitive in both those matches. He's not sort of a shadow of himself or anything, but he's not winning them, and he's expended a lot of sort of knee canister on them, and it doesn't sound like he's got a lot of knee canister to spare at the moment. So
knee canister is an amazing line.
People get the idea. Anything else to mention? Do Belgium deserve a little mention?
Yes, absolutely. Well, Mertens and Bencic played a great match, didn't they? Oh. Mertens actually came the closest to beating Bencic, 7-6 in the third. She really didn't play a good final set tiebreak, lost it without winning a point, Mertens. But up until that point, and that was in brutal conditions that day in Sydney, like really, really extreme heat that they were having to play. And I was so impressed with both players. And then Zizou Bergs has been an absolute revelation. He lost his... Well, actually, maybe not a revelation. Maybe that's sort of doing what he did at the back end of last season a disservice, because I think this sort of run has been coming, and he's felt like a coming player, and he's just put it together this week. He lost his first match of the tournament, but then kept winning, and yeah, every time I looked up, he seemed to be doing something really impressive on the court or twerking on social media. Like, what a week for Zizou Bergs.
I like Zizou Bergs. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I hope he happens, because I think he'd be good news for men's tennis. World number 3 is up for grabs, Zizou. Look, I don't want to be a downer, and obviously we've had our fun with Sinner and Alcaraz on the private jet, and I stand by that fun. But mentioning the extreme heat and conditions in Sydney, which were very challenging just to watch. You know, that stadium was empty for large swathes of yesterday because it was unbearable to sit in those conditions. And I know they put the roof on the stadium, and that kind of just held the heat in it. We had a message on Instagram from somebody who went to the tournament and had been looking forward to it for a long time and was absolutely just gutted to be confronted with those conditions that they couldn't sit in. You know, noted that it would be impossible for elderly or remotely infirm people to go to a tennis event and experience those kind of conditions, and just sort of the juxtaposition of that, and then, you know, Alcaraz and Sinner arriving via private jet. It just, and sort of looking around like, oh, is anybody going to draw a line between the climate change and the private jets, or are we all just gonna, I don't know. My snowflake moment. It does feel a bit like, does anybody care about this stuff anymore? There's a Michael Jackson musical that's just opened down the road here in Melbourne. I'm like, wow, nobody cares about stuff anymore. Anyway, that's it for part 1. Join us in part 2 when we'll talk about other tennis stuff. Welcome back to part 2 of today's pod, where we should definitely talk now about Aryna Sabalenka, who has won Brisbane again, who has nailed herself on as if she needed nailing anywhere, but she has further nailed herself on as the heavy favourite for the Australian Open title, with a win in the final over Ukraine's Marta Kostyuk, 6-4, 6-2. Now, on paper she was the heavy favourite in that matchup, but how about the players that Kostyuk beat to get there? 3 top 10 players in a row. Amanda Anisimova, Mira Andreeva, Jessica Pegula. Marta Kostyuk was awesome this week, and Sabalenka took care of her quite handily in that final, having beat Karoline Mukova in the semi-finals. A joyful match, that semi-final that I watched almost in its entirety, that David, you watched in the middle of the night. And you know, she's taken care of everybody this week, Sabalenka, and lots of different types of players as well. Like, just the absolute dream preparation for Melbourne.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's on both counts. Kind of, I sort of feel like the United Cup, as wonderful an event as it is emotionally very tiring. Like, I look at the teams that were out there, it's wonderful, and I'm sure it'll give them great feels. But I also wonder how tired they all are after it, you know, when they go to Melbourne. Whereas I look at Sabalenka, who's played Brisbane, and she has encountered all these different playing styles and players who are playing well, and she's just sort of worked them out as she's gone along. I mean, the match against Mukova, she was absolutely sensational, really, to use the old word. And she was... The most devastating shot in many ways for me was her use of the backhand drop shot, because you could see, and the same happened a little bit in a couple of moments today, where an opponent is drawing her into a slice exchange or a shot where she's got to use that, and then suddenly she'll just throw in a drop shot, and she plays it with such confidence and such knowledge of when to do it and what it'll do to the opponent and what to do after it, you know, where to run, and it's become a real weapon in the game of Aryna Sabalenka. Mukova tried everything. You know, she tried everything she's got in that expansive toolkit of hers. She's had a good week. She looks healthy, thank goodness. But she just couldn't make any impact against Sabalenka. And then you had the final today with a player who could make impact, actually. I think what Marta Kostyuk has shown this week as a real light bulb discovery for me. I did not know she had that sort of power. I'm not even sure that she really realised that if she just opened her shoulders quite like that the devastation that she could cause against those big hitting opponents that she's beaten. I mean, she lost 3 games against Jessica Pegula. But again, you know, she was 3-love down in the final against Sabalenka. Pretty nervy opening. And then suddenly she reeled off 3 games in a row with just the most awesome hitting. And I'm looking at Sabalenka and thinking, I wonder what she's making of that. And really, she became steadier, Sabalenka, in the match, and Kostyuk didn't. But I hope that this isn't just a 1-week moment of exciting tennis from Kostyuk above her normal level. I hope this is the new her, because to me, that new level, if it is repeatable, puts her in with the top 10 players in the world, you know, and the players that could be in the quarterfinals and maybe better. But I don't know whether it's just the 1 week.
Matt, a new Marta Kostyuk?
I mean, she has always been one of those players who I've looked at and thought, you could be ranked higher than you are. You could be doing even better than you are. Like, I do feel like she's been almost waiting to happen for quite a while now. But I do think, again, the serve has often been a bit of an issue for her, which I think looked good this week. And as David said, that extra firepower that she had was really notable. So yes, I definitely, to me, it felt quite repeatable what she was doing, given the foundations that she's laid over the last couple of years or so with her game. So I definitely feel pretty confident that Kostyuk can have a good season and keep this up.
We were braced for things being awkward after the match. We knew there wasn't going to be a handshake because Marta Kostyuk, like a lot of the Ukrainian players, doesn't do handshakes with Russian and Belarusian opponents. Sabalenka knew there wasn't going to be a handshake. The cameras cut away from it, but I think that all sort of played out fairly smoothly. Sabalenka was caught on mic on the broadcast I was watching, saying to I think it was the WTA communications representative, they were discussing, ceremony requirements, and Sabalenka said there's not going to be a picture with the two of us, right? And there wasn't a picture with the two of them, and it was incredibly sad and uncomfortable match. I think even more so than I was expecting, and I was braced for it.
Yeah, I think definitely. Kostyuk, I thought, spoke incredibly well during the ceremony. She didn't mention Sabalenka by name in a way that often, players will do in the ceremony. They'll normally start with their opponent and congratulating them. But she did sort of say, I thank all my opponents this week for the matches and sort of helping to bring out this level in me. And then when it was Sabalenka's turn to speak, she did start by congratulating Marta Kostyuk. She didn't turn round to look at her when she said those words, but she said the right things and spoke very, very nicely about Kostyuk's game and wished her well for the season ahead. And then I don't think there were any, as you said, photos of them together afterwards. I think they were done individually. And of course, there was also the sort of added layer of mess between them because of what happened at the end of last year when Kostyuk was taken out of context by Tennis 365 with her comments about Sabalenka being more powerful, and that situation. I don't know whether Sabalenka was fully across the sort of revision that came out afterwards. I think that reporting was so bad and so irresponsible that the damage had already been done. And what they did was inserted a question about intimidation, so it made it really sound like Kostyuk was saying something worse about Sabalenka, and also they took out her comments about Kostyuk saying that she's sure that players are not taking anything to boost their testosterone levels, and they sort of left it open in that original reporting that Kostyuk might have been hinting at that. I still think you can maybe have some issues with what Kostyuk said there, but it was nowhere near as bad as it first seemed when the correction from Tennis 365 eventually came. But it strikes me that just the damage has been done there, and very notably Sabalenka kissed her biceps when she won the match today.
In the men's final in Brisbane, Daniil Medvedev, he's back, folks, or is he? I don't know. He beat Brandon Nakashima in the final, 6-2, 7-6. He's back, although he's still doing the thing that he's always done, which is winning titles he's never won before. I had a moment of panic when he was a break up in the second set of this final, because I thought he'd won Brisbane. I thought, has he won Brisbane before? No, he can't do this. The universe can't allow this to happen. This is one of my favourite, funniest trivia things in tennis. But no, he hasn't won Brisbane before, so it was on. He had a little wobble there at the end, got broken back and taken to a tie-break by Nakashima, but then accelerated through the tie-break very quickly. Impossible question for you both. Is Daniil Medvedev back? David?
Certainly partially. And I think the rest of the story will unfold in front of us. And I know, again, that's unsatisfactory punditry in many ways. But the fact is, I think he's playing way, way better. He's playing the best he's played since he was back here, whatever. But I don't feel like he's at the level he used to be at yet, because it's not a big enough sample size. I think at the end of last year, he was already showing improved form and improved interest. The fact that he kind of changed his whole team and brought Thomas Johansson on board, I thought that was a really important moment for him, of realization and recognition, acknowledgement that he was gone, really, and it was a big question mark. Do you really want to put the work in? Do you really want to uncover all the stones to try and get back there again? And it's not going to be an overnight thing, and it's still not. But to win this title off the back of the improvements he's clearly made, and he's got his nice short back and sides haircut, and he suddenly looks neat, and he looks invested. I think his interest level is back. I think his tennis is looking good, but let's not forget just how good he used to be. You know, this is a guy who was right there with Nadal and Djokovic, and I mean, okay, not as good as them, but he was fighting out for the titles. He used to beat Yannick Sinner all the time, and then suddenly he stopped beating him. And some of that is because Sinner got so good as well. But clearly Medvedev regressed. And I just feel like it looks like the fog has cleared in his brain, and he's really up for it. So I'm fascinated to see whether his body can cope, whether his game is, you know, at some point some players lose something with the game. They lose a bit of potency, and I'm trying to find out whether he's still got that or not, and I'm not sure yet.
Maybe the comb over was the problem. He ditched the comb over, and he's back. I thought, Matt, that his ground strokes had bite back on them. Still question marks about the serve. I'm not sure the serve will ever be back to 2019 pre-hernia levels. But I thought from the back of the court there was a bit more pep in the shots.
Yes, I thought the same, actually. And I'm wary because I do think those conditions in Brisbane generally are quite quick, aren't they? And maybe that also helped Marta Kostyuk find a bit of extra in her ground strokes. But also, I think with Kostyuk, it was the intent behind them really that was so notable. And I think with Medvedev, it was definitely there. It was definitely able to hurt opponents again. He served really well in this match against Tiafoe, and I do think his first serve has, like you say, not got back to its peak level, but I do think it's better than where it was. I think his shoulder was a bit of an issue for a while. It strikes me that maybe that's a bit better than it was. I still think the second serve he's got some problems with. But I was impressed today because I felt like I'd seen Medvedev lose that match he played today a lot last year, you know, where he serves for it, double faults on match point, loses his way, and I thought he could completely go there and implode. But kind of what David's saying about how some of the fog's cleared and he seems a little bit calmer on court, and he reset, to use Pam Shriver's word, really well in that tie break. And yeah, like, let's see if he can beat Benjamin Bonzi in the first round of a slam before declaring him back. And his form last year at the slams was absolutely appalling. He won one match, I think, at the slams all of last year. Right. So I tend to come down on the side as David, like, I don't think Medvedev's ever going to be back to where he was in terms of world number one and, you know, right at the top of the sport. I do think those days have gone, but I remember us having a conversation at the end of the last year about whether he could get back in the ATP finals, for example, in 2026. And it feels like that is achievable, you know, with this form, with the picture of men's tennis right now. You know, we've talked about Fritz struggling.
Daniil, world number 3 is up for grabs.
Right. Like, it is really. And Medvedev is, you know, if Zverev's in that conversation, if Fritz is in that conversation, which they are, I would say this kind of form from Medvedev would, and given his history in terms of he has won a lot of titles and done a lot of winning, it would put him in that conversation. So a sort of half and half. He's back to something closer to. He's
not in the abyss anymore.
He's not in. Yeah, he's not in the doldrums.
Yeah.
But
because he really was for a little bit there. But yeah,
He was.
If the draw gods like us at all, they will draw him to face Benjamin Bonzi in round 1 of the Australian Open, because that's the only way we'll truly know if he's back. Let's go back to the women. Let's head to Auckland, where Aryna Svitolina won the title. She beat Wang Jinyu in the final there, 6-3, 7-6. Some very good Svitolina Monfils vibes over in Auckland. Hasn't Monfils won the men's title there before? In fact, didn't he win it to become the oldest human ever to win anything? Isn't that a thing?
Sounds possible.
Won it at quite a late stage in his career, shall we say. Back when, David, you declared him the player of the season, I think.
Well, I was right at that point. He was awesome for the first.
You persuaded me. I signed up.
First 3 months of the year, he was absolutely sensational last year.
Well played, Svitolina.
And
she's got
beat Zizou Bergs in the final 6-3, 6-4 last year in Auckland, and I did see a bit of Svitolina. Really close match with Sonny Cartel. That was good. She was playing well. I mean, she was playing solid. You know, we've got so used to her hitting the living daylights out of the ball in the last couple of years, but she was moving incredibly well. She was just like a moving wall. And I was thinking, good luck knocking that down.
Yeah, Cartel served for the match there, didn't she, against Svitolina? But she did well to turn it round. And yeah, I thought this final, which was kind of the only one of the finals today I didn't watch live. I had to resort to highlights. It was a 4 a.m. job in the UK for this, and there was going to be about 5 tennis matches starting at 6 a.m. So I had to pace myself. But I felt like it was her experience shining through in this one. It felt like she played the big moments better than Wang, who impressed in that second set. And she's got such a good finals record, Svitolina. She's won 19 of her 23 finals on the WTA tour. Like, she knows how to get these done and close them out when she's in those latter stages. And yeah, it's really impressive, this sort of second career that she's built for herself, Aryna Svitolina, and continues to impress.
Heading to Hong Kong, prepare yourself for heartbreak. Lorenzo Musetti has lost another final.
Needs to have a word with Svitolina.
This time to Alexander Bublik, who makes his top 10 debut as a result of this result this week in Hong Kong. He was likely to make his top 10 debut kind of regardless at some point in the next few weeks, because he's got basically nothing to defend. But still, it has happened, and that's an incredible achievement for him. Lorenzo Musetti has made his top 5 debut, as celebrated by Flavio Cobolli on Instagram in sort of just good Italian vibes. Cobolli was hitting at Melbourne Park with Sara Errani today. He's just...
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, he's just the sort of Italian vibes guy. He's the David Law of Italian tennis. So look, that is incredible for Lorenzo Musetti, and the good news is that world number 3 is up for grabs, Lorenzo. Well, and Alexander Bublik. But the bad news is you have lost another final, and you haven't won one now since 2022. And that is a problem.
Yeah. I would think overall they come out of this tournament, both of those two, feeling pretty good. I mean, Bublik in the top 10 for the first time, he was absolutely bowled over by it at the end in the sort of celebration. You could tell that really meant something to him, and obviously a year has gone by and he was in nowhere a year ago. But Musetti's just been doing it incrementally, hasn't he? And because he hasn't won titles along the way, it's pretty hard to make these sort of ranking gains when you're not actually holding any trophies at the end of it all. So he's been very consistent, and I do feel like this is a real step in the right direction, because it's on a hard court. And was it last year in Melbourne, Matt, that you purposefully on the first day of the tournament went out to watch Lorenzo Musetti? I seem to remember this happening.
I do that a lot, to be fair.
Yes, it definitely sounds like Matt. Yeah, it was on here. I think.
You definitely came back and were a bit disillusioned with things, and because he's such a wonderful watch, isn't he? I mean, watching him play against a guy like Bublik is really fun, but I think that strides are being taken here.
Well, this time last year, you definitely said, and I'm sure definitely did say on various podcasts, Matt, Lorenzo Musetti has a hard court problem. Would you say that now?
No, I don't think I would. I think he has really got a lot better on hard courts over the last year. Sort of emphasised the back end of last year, really, with that US Open run, and then in particular, I think the matches he played after that, actually, like against even in a match he lost against Novak Djokovic in Athens, he was awesome.
Yeah,
and then he played great against Dimonor at the ATP finals, didn't he? And got that win, and it was a real moment. And this was all happening on hard court. So no, I wouldn't say so. I think some of the changes he's made to his game have helped him. His serve, he's getting a bit more out of that, and he's hitting his forehand brilliantly, like so well. And that shot is doing damage even on a hard court now. I think the thing about the titles is, it's like you would definitely have rather had the progress he's made over the last few years and not picked up any titles, rather than just won a couple here and there just to say that you've got some titles. Like, I think you would sign for what he's done in terms of his trajectory and his improvement, absolutely. The problem is,
it's not like he hasn't won titles. He's not carrying that chain around his neck.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but he has cleared the hurdle.
Yeah. I think for me, the bigger thing is, what does the finals record represent? Does it still say something sort of a bit fundamental about the Musetti game or mindset? And I think he still slightly just lacks that killer instinct. You know, I think he really improved his resistance and his resilience last year in matches. Like, remember that run in Monte Carlo where he kept coming from a set down and playing all those 3-set matches, and that was something we'd never really seen from him before. And he's tough to beat now, I would say, Musetti. He really is. He has far fewer matches where he just totally doesn't show up. But can he like go out there and get it and level up in the biggest moments? I think that's what his sort of finals record sort of slightly represents. He's struggling just slightly to just get over the line, and that is just a quality that I think you have to either you've got it or you've got to develop it. You know, like I think we have seen some players develop that to a certain extent, and he's still young enough that I think he can, but that it is still missing, I would say, from Musetti. And I think that's the bigger deal than, he hasn't won a 250 in the last few years. Like that I don't think that moves the needle all that much. But maybe he needs to win one to unlock it. I don't know. I don't know. It's like sort of chicken and egg situation. But he's playing really well. And he was a bit injured in this final. His elbow seemed to be bothering him. I don't think he had a medical timeout, but he had some treatment on it. He did actually come out and win the doubles final afterwards with Sonego, so he has won a title in doubles. And they'd been struggling to win. They'd lost 2 finals last year as well, but he's in a good place. I think Musetti generally he's on the right track, but the problem is it's hanging over him. He's desperate to win a title, and I think if he can just get that burden off him, that might help sort of unleash him even more.
It's tough seeing players injured in like the first week of the season, isn't it? I feel like I've seen more.
There's been quite a lot of that.
Could be confirmation bias, because I'm so conscious all the time of season length and lack of off season, and how flogged the players are, but seeing players injured now and hearing about withdrawals and long-term chronic issues in young players, which we'll be talking about in part 3, it's a bit of a buzzkill, and I'm worried about it. So do come back for part 3 and more buzzkill and other news. Welcome back to part 3 of today's pod, where we have Wildcard news from the Australian Open. Justice for Stan Wawrinka. He gets an Australian Open wildcard. Was it ever in doubt? Who knows? I think it might have been quite in doubt at one point. That is the sense I get. But in a world where wildcards exist, obviously true justice, David, is wildcards not existing. But in a world where wildcards exist, justice has been done.
So you don't want Stan Wawrinka in the Australian Open?
I'd love him to get his ranking up and qualify.
Oh, come on, he's
qualify
40.
Right. Right, well, you know.
You don't want him in?
No. Not at the expense of the integrity of the sport, David. That means more to me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm glad he's in and Nick Kyrgios isn't, put it that way. Kyrgios apparently was so decent that he didn't want to have a wild card at the expense of somebody else who could make better use of it.
Yes, news from Nick Kyrgios' Instagram. He said after some good conversations with the... Sorry. He said, after some good conversations with Tennis Australia, I've made the call to focus on doubles for this year's Australian Open. That is
probably for the best.
Going to take some beating as a line for 2026. I'm fit and back on court. Yeah, we saw that. We saw you losing to Alex Kovacevic. But 5-setters are a different beast, and I'm not quite ready to go the distance yet. This tournament means everything to me, but I'd rather give my spot, you entitled twat. I'd rather give my spot to somebody who's ready to make their moment count. It's all building blocks, and I'll be back next year and pumped to compete. See you out there.
Look at that, Catherine. You and Nick Kyrgios have got common ground. The integrity of the sport he's thinking about there.
We both care equally for the integrity of the sport.
Yeah, what a selfless act from Nick Kyrgios.
Can't wait to see him in the doubles. In less good news, Zheng Qinwen, finalist here just 2 years ago, obviously a very injury-blighted 2025 season. Well, that continues. She's out of the Australian Open, continuing to recover from that elbow injury that she had surgery on last year. She said, making this decision has been incredibly difficult for me. Melbourne is my lucky place where I won my first Grand Slam main draw match and had my best experience. Although my recovery is progressing well and my off-season has gone smoothly, to play Grand Slam requires players to maintain an extreme competitive condition. Currently, I have not yet reached my best condition that I've set for myself. Now that's a fairly upbeat statement, but the fact is, David, she had this surgery many months ago and she's not fit yet, and that is a fairly big concern, I would say, at this stage.
Yeah, and those sort of body parts as well, whether it's wrist or elbow or anything like that, you always worry, don't you? Just how do you rehab that? How do you get fit whilst also stress testing that part of the body? It's not easy, and she's so good for the sport. You know, she's such an important player, really, on numerous levels, and she's a great kind of contender for top titles at her best too. And this just has stopped her in her tracks, and it's a terrible shame. I hope she's well soon.
Yeah, we wish her well. Tennis is better for her being a relevant force in it. Last bit of news before we look ahead to this week. Some news reported in The Athletic by Matt Futterman. Some brilliant reporting by Matt Futterman about secret clandestine meetings. It's the traitors of the tennis world, and it's been happening in London. Matt reports, days before the start of the Australian Open in Melbourne, several of the most powerful leaders in tennis gathered 10,000 miles away to chart their way out of the antitrust lawsuits that threaten their power. The leaders of the men's and women's tours and the organisers of the other three Grand Slam tournaments, so all of them apart from the Australian Open, spent Tuesday and Wednesday of last week in closed-door meetings in London, according to three sources that were briefed on the discussions. The leaders discussed the structure of a deal aimed at giving tournaments financial security, producing more revenue for the sport, and giving players the increased pay, benefits and voice for which they've been pushing ever harder in recent months. Basically, this is about reaching some kind of settlement with the PTPA for the lawsuit that they lodged last year, and the reason the Australian Open aren't involved in this is because they have already reached a private individual settlement with the PTPA. Now, I'd say, David, my knowledge of sort of lawsuits, particularly US lawsuits, is not sufficient or substantial for me to really draw any major conclusions. The only one thing that strikes me is if this lawsuit had absolutely nothing to it, it would have been dismissed by now by a judge. It's obviously got some legs. Now, Matt Fathom does report later in the piece that the Grand Slams and the tours are appealing to a judge for the lawsuit to be thrown out on various different technical grounds. So there's still room for that to happen yet. These things rumble on. But it's obviously cleared the first hurdle of credibility, or maybe the first few hurdles, is what strikes me.
Yeah, this is further evidence that they're sufficiently concerned about it that they're all getting together to try to find a way out. And even though the Professional Tennis Players Association has taken this hit to its own credibility with Novak Djokovic is distancing himself from the organisation he kind of co-invented, these are still serious lawsuits and they require attention. And that's what's been happening. And it sounds like there's still quite a long way to go in that. I mean, Matt reports that they're not close to any sort of resolution here or anything like that, whereas I found his line about Tennis Australia's decision to settle absolutely fascinating. He said that deal essentially meant that Tennis Australia had switched sides in a tacit agreement to help the PTPA wage a fight against its former allies. I just found that really interesting, the manoeuvring that's going on here, and when that was reported at the time just before Christmas, Tennis Australia were very keen to make sure that it was reported that they were not accepting any fault or that they had done anything wrong, but they were settling. They were getting this out of the way, and I mean, I don't have the knowledge either, but I suppose I'm somewhat taken by how much this seems to have rattled everybody in the sport to have to come together and do something about it. So it's clearly a serious business.
And that line, David, that you picked out about Tennis Australia and what their decision to settle apparently represents, all the more interesting in light of the reporting that hasn't been confirmed by any means, but the reporting a few weeks ago that Craig Tiley would be leaving Tennis Australia to take up the role as head of the USTA. And I said that hasn't been confirmed, but it hasn't been denied either, and those were credible sources reporting that was in the works. So, as ever, the web of tennis authorities and infrastructure is sticky and complicated. Okay, tennis this week,
fair.
Folks. Tennis this week. We have a WTA 500 in Adelaide at the same time as an ATP 250. Madison Keys is the top seed in the women's event after Jessica Pegula withdrew. She's the defending champion, of course, Madison Keys. Mira Andreeva is the de facto top seed because Pegula withdrew after the draw. Clear as day. Round 1 matches include Samsonova against Vondrousova. Daria Kasatkina, of course, now representing Australia, takes on Maria Sakkari in round 1. Victoria Mboko against Beatrice Haddad-Maia. Ayla Tomljanovic against Clara Towson. Svea Kenin against Maya Joint. That's a tough draw, very tough week for Maya Joint so far. And Yelena Ostapenko against hotly tipped for success Teresa Valentova. In the men's event in Adelaide, Alejandro Davidovich-Fokina and Tommy Paul are the top 2 seeds. Also in the draw are Valentin Vachereau, Stefanos Tsitsipas, Thomas Mahatch and Francisco Cerundolo.
How long do you think I will still be including Vachereau in the draw section of the weekly previews?
I'm intrigued and I'm going to be monitoring closely.
Okay.
I love seeing who you've picked out. I'm like, oh, you think that's noteworthy, do you? But no, I accept Vachereau clears the bar at the moment. Round 1 matches include Sebastian Korda against Thanasi Kokkinakis and Terence Atman against Ugo Humbert. Another one that's probably on thin ice being picked out, I would say. Tough news out of Adelaide today. Joao Fonseca, he was supposed to play Hong Kong, wasn't he, last week, withdrew from that. He's now withdrawn from Adelaide too. This was the statement from his team. Joao has a straightened spine and suffered a stress fracture 5 years ago when he was still a junior. Therefore, his lower back is the most sensitive area of his body, and being a high-performance athlete requires constant care. That worries me a lot. I know about stress fractures in backs and the long-term problems thereof. The fact that it's still a concern 5 years later suggests that it will probably always be a concern to some degree. It's a very similar situation to what we see Artefis continuing to struggle with. I found this news, and particularly that statement and the sort of revelation of what exactly is going on Fonseca, I found that a real bummer. Like that's a big worry for me with him.
And
I hope I'm
with
wrong,
too many of them, there's so many young players right now that are suffering, and it's not just short-term muscle injuries. These are things that really worry you. I was one of the little stories from the Andy Murray podcast that we did yesterday was about his wrist injury, and when he was a sort of 19, and it cost him three months, and he'd got knee joint problems. So I take some hope from the fact that he was able to overcome them and have a long career. But the Draper, Fils, and hopefully not Fonseca. The sport needs these guys.
The WTA are in Hobart this week in Tasmania. WTA 250 there. Raducanu is playing McCartney Kessler. They're the top 2 seeds. Round 1 matches include 45-year-old Venus Williams against 38-year-old Tatiana Maria. Excellent stuff. Also, well, I say excellent stuff. Excellent stuff within the landscape of wildcards existing. Also, we have Barbora Krejcikova and Peyton Stearns, round 1, and we have Janice Chen against Eva Jovic. 2 exciting young talents. The ATP are in Auckland, where Ben Shelton and Casper Ruud are the top 2 seeds. We also have Gemma Fils, Jakob Menchik and Cameron Norrie all in the draw. And of course we have the Australian Open qualifying this week too. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And we have the 1 Point Slam. And I've seen multiple trailers for that on Channel 9 this week, and I am worried. I'm obviously open and pure-hearted about it. It's going to be brilliant, but I am worried. There are Australian celebrities taking part.
I don't understand the 1 Point Slam anymore.
I don't want Australian celebrities in it.
It has gone from 1 to 100 in like Catherine likes it, therefore let's go all in. It's just not what it was. But maybe it'll be still good.
I'm going into it with an open mind. I'm going to the qualifiers tomorrow which are apparently, you have to really dig around to find this information. They are starting from 5 p.m. and they're tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday on court 6. It's the qualifiers for the plebs. I don't think these random Australian celebrities have to go through the qualifiers.
So there's no celebrities at the qualifiers and there's no pros at the qualifiers.
No.
And there's
all AMs.
And have there
So
already
basically
been
going to
some
watch a lot of club level tennis players
play one point?
play 1 point against one another?
And are there any AMs who've already qualified for the big night on Wednesday?
Couldn't quite get a handle
I
on
can't
the
figure it
website,
out
Matt,
at all.
because there's a website which highlights the champions from each of the regions.
Yeah.
And at first I thought, oh, I'll do some research. These are my guys. These are the people I'm going to be cheering for on Wednesday. I'd better...
I got a press release about them.
Right. But I don't know if they've only gone into the qualifiers tomorrow night, in which case, premature press release, folks.
Yeah.
But I will go and do some important journalism tomorrow, and I will let you know.
Thank you.
And that is our next pod. After the 1 Point Slam on Wednesday, covering all the important stuff from the Australian Open. David and Matt are travelling tomorrow, Monday, arriving Tuesday night, all being well. Please cross all fingers for them. We recorded our Australian Open Relived show last night, and that will be up on Monday. So probably by the time you're listening to this, it is already up. Or very soon to be up. So if you're a friend of the Tennis Podcast, check that out. Or if you'd like to be a friend of the Tennis Podcast in order to check that out, then the link, of course, is in our show notes. We are going to have a little meet-up in Garden Square before the 1 Point Slam on Wednesday. 6 p.m. meeting where, Matt?
By Leslie Bowery's bust in Garden Square, which is our favourite iconic spot where we recorded an emergency pod. What was that, 6 years ago now? And we always get a little photo there whenever we go back to Melbourne Park. So just go round all the busts and find Leslie Bowery and we will be there.
Like an episode of The Traitors where you have to murder in plain sight. So if you're around Melbourne on Monday and you'd like to come and say hi, and generally we'll get pumped together about the 1 Point Slam and the actual Australian Open, then we'll see you at Leslie Bowery at 6 p.m. on Wednesday. Then we have our draw show on Thursday. Matt, we like an Australian Open draw. They had a marching band last year. That was good.
I believe they've already set up the live stream and they've advertised it. They know what they're doing in Australia. We like it.
We like it, and we'll be here to talk about it with our show on Thursday. Friday is Media Day. We'll be going to all the press conferences, asking all the important questions. David's going to be asking everybody about heated rivalry, I'm sure. Then we have our final Australian Open preview hype show on Saturday. And then it all kicks off on Sunday. I always forget about the Sunday start here. It's not in my it's not in my DNA yet. But anyway, it all kicks off on Sunday, and we will be here with daily pods, of course. And you can follow our adventures on Instagram. I was a bit short of content today, so I had to disclose a very bad thing that happened to me whilst in a Starbucks toilet. So do check that out on Instagram. Probably only be there.
I haven't seen that myself yet.
Such a bad moment. And also do sign up to... I feel like I should clarify because that sounds...
I was going to say, it's really bad, but I think you might also be imagining something worse, given the mention of a toilet.
I've managed to make it sound worse than it actually is, and it was pretty bad. But it wasn't like toilet stuff. I just happened to be in the toilet. Great. It wasn't toilet stuff. Okay. Do sign up to the newsletter. No toilet stuff in there. You get stats, and you get Matt's stats, predictions every day of the Australian Open. We put ourselves out there to be humiliated. So if that sounds fun, and it always is fun, then sign up to our newsletter. It is free, and the link is in our show notes. And there really is good stuff in there. It's not just, we really put a lot of love into those newsletters, and it's good content that you don't get elsewhere. It is not just pictures of dogs, although there definitely are pictures of dogs. And speaking of dogs, folks, hello to my lovely mascot Bodhi. I feel like that's the first time I'm saying that. I did his big intro last week, but this is my first hello Bodhi, and it feels good. Hope you're well, Bodhi. David says a big hello to Maisie.
Right, Maisie.
And Matt, of course, says hello to Roger.
Hello, Roger. Your paws are very popular on our Instagram this
Very
week,
popular.
as they should be.
Speaking of Roger, he's back, isn't he? Saturday, our hype.
Oh, that
show.
Roger. Yeah, Federer. Yeah. I was thinking-
At that hype show, better not clash with Crowded House and Roger.
I was going to
Federer.
say, are we more excited about Federer or Crowded House?
I'm pretty into Crowded House, to be honest. They got some bangers.
Mm.
Hello to our executive producers, Greg, Chris, and Jeff. You're all legends, and we salute you. Matt, let's have some shout-outs.
We have 2 shout-outs today. The first for Lucia Carey, who was born in Venezuela and now lives in Brooklyn, New York.
Goodness. Hello, Lucia. What a name.
Wonderful.
And
Thanks, Lucia.
Venezuelan living in America. That's, wow. Must be quite a time for Lucia. Keep you in our thoughts.
And Lucia says, the shout-out was gifted to me by my best friend, Stephanie. I started playing tennis in 2020, which led me to becoming a mega fan of this podcast. My non-stop tennis talk eventually convinced my friend Steph to pick up a racket and also listen to the show. It has become our shared favourite obsession.
Oh, gosh, you influenced Stephanie to actually start playing tennis. Like Jib, our editor in the Philippines.
It's my favourite thing when people say that the pod got them into playing tennis.
Lucia, that is absolutely lovely. Thank you for sharing
Wonderful.
that. Really lovely.
And Lucia says, I'd like to know if you know of any Venezuelan tennis players. I only know of Garbiñe Muguruza being born there, and that, I don't know of any more.
No, same. I would have said Garbiñe Muguruza. In the early stages of her career, there was talk of whether she might represent Venezuela, wasn't there? But eventually elected for Spain. No, but I'm sure there will be one day, Lucia.
And we also have Madeline Schnittke.
Oh, hello, Madeline.
Hi, Madeline.
Who is from Chicago.
Love to
Home
go to Chicago.
of the Bears, who had a big win last night in the very dying seconds against the Green Bay Packers. So they're
Quite the comeback.
How often
through
that
the
happens,
wildcard
isn't
round.
it? I think it's like the Labour Cup, and the sport is engineered for drama in the dying seconds.
And you're like this. Madeline says, I was brought into the TTP fam during Wimbledon 2022 by my 2 best friends from law school, Melissa and Catherine. Same church, different pew. And the shared TTP chat has brought us even closer together. My most vivid memory of the pod is listening to the Jimmy Connors relived episode on a long walk and literally crying in the street hearing the guest editor's personal story. Shout out, nice Greg. It's so great to hear all the connections tennis has.
That was executive producer Greg that guest edited that show, and it's one of the ones that sticks with me as well.
Yeah, same.
Oh, big moment to be called Madeline. You've got a very famous Lily Allen song named after you.
I knew that.
That silence is the sound of David nodding along. Madeline, thank you.
That's it. Just the 2 shout-outs today.
Just the
Madeline
2?
and Lucia. Yeah.
The big 2.
that is the end of our
Number three-
2025
number three-
shout-outs.
Number 3 is up for grabs. That's the theme of our show.
Yeah.
Madeline and Lucia, thank you ever so much for being friends of the Tennis Podcast. We are, of course, part of the Athletic Podcast Network. Matt, David, get yourselves to Melbourne safely. I can't wait to see you. And we will be back on Wednesday when we're all together in Melbourne. Speak to you then.